One Punch Man Season 3 doesn't look good. I think that's a fairly reasonable assessment. Despite being the show millions around the world have their eyes on, despite being the successor to one of the best looking TV anime seasons in recent memory, and despite being more than familiar with the widespread rejection and backlash a show can face due to subpar quality, One Punch Man Season 3 looks very weak, a lot weaker than Season 2 so far. Be it the lack of movement, or more importantly, the visible if not jarring corner cutting and last minute scraping, One Punch Man Season 3 is genuinely upsetting to watch, especially because I'm aware of how bad the production conditions are. Everything about this project leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and as such has another video about One Punch Man Season 3, or more specifically the animation quality of it. I'll go over the reasons why this season looks so mediocre, I'll talk about the episodes in detail, and finally I'll talk about the future and if there's any hope left for this show. I know there's a lot of extremism online, lots of hate campaigns, lots of badly researched, bad faith opinions, lots of bad stuff, but I hope this video ultimately ends up being educational. Make sure to subscribe, that's a fairly educational thing to do, you'll probably learn a lot about animation and the like if you follow this channel, go on, do it. You can also become a member of this channel, members get at least 2 exclusive videos per month, custom badges and emojis, shoutouts and more, just go down there and press the join button. Right, so first things first, I feel like I should catch you guys up to speed with this miserable godforsaken production. I know I've gone over this stuff in detail before, but here's an abbreviated version just so all of us are on the same page. One Punch Man Season 3 is an incredibly messy production, it's completely and utterly f***ed behind the scenes. I believe this season had less than 7 months of production time, and that's the best case scenario, that's how bad we're talking. In an interview published on jcstaff's official website, One Punch Man animation producer Atsushi Fujishiro indirectly said that the project was still in its pre-production stage back in the March of this year, which, you do the maths. The production team in charge was assigned deadlines that can only be described as criminal, they were set up to fail, they were placed in an unwinnable situation, any other cliche that conveys that same general feeling, bad stuff, really really bad stuff. Now, I know what you're thinking, it is a mess, yes, we can see that, but who's to blame? Well, I'm not entirely sure, jcstaff, Bandai Namco, I'm not sure which entity from the production committee has more influence over this project, but I can assure you that it's not the staff. The animators didn't go, you know what Mr. Producer, give us less time, I can assure you that wasn't the case. Anyway, point is, this project is about as far removed from the word healthy or even the word reasonable as humanly possible. Now, some of you may be thinking, oh, but what about Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2? It had a terrible schedule as well, but it had so many highlights, why can't One Punch Man be the same? Well, it's because of the astronomical difference in talent pool between Jujutsu Kaisen and One Punch Man. One Punch Man Season 3, that is. Keisuke Seishimo's production line at MAPPA is insanely stacked, you could probably make 50 One Punch Mans with JJK's staff. This show simply did not have that luxury. Like I said, it's an incredibly messy, scuffed production. Now with all of that out of the way, let's finally go through the episodes. Episode 1 was fine, it was alright, I've talked about it in detail before so I won't yap on for too long. Basically, it had very little movement, with the best looking cut being this quick shot of Fubuki animated by Kenichiro Aoki and the worst looking shots being these cuts of Garo that completely fell apart. Overall though, it wasn't bad whatsoever, the amount of movement was a bit less than your typical anime, but it was more than compensated for by the drawing quality. Plus it was a non-action episode from an action anime, so whatever, it wasn't a big deal. I was, however, bothered by the direction and the storyboards. I felt like this episode was painfully one-to-one with the manga and had a few continuity errors / lack of bridging shots. Now yes, these are things most casual fans won't even notice, but I am a nerd with a lot of time on my hands, so I have an awareness for that sort of thing. Again, it was fine, nothing bad about it. The second episode, however, was incredibly rough. Unlike the first episode, it didn't have that season premiere polish to hide behind, and as a result, it was filled with jank and corner cutting. I'm sure most casual fans hyperfixated on the lack of movement, but that was far from the main issue. In fact, it was barely an issue. The main problem was the sheer number of corners the staff had to cut just to create basic scenes. Be it sliding a single frame side to side to replicate a walk cycle, despite the fact that walk cycles are an easy, resourceful way of animating walking to begin with. Be it the widely mocked Garo sliding, be it these kids seemingly summoning stuff out of thin air because no matter how many stones they throw, the piles don't shrink. Lots of that stuff, plus we had more of those continuity errors and lack of bridging shots. Be it this fence having two different designs depending on the shot, be it Karo being far away from this kid in one frame and right next to him in the next, tissues galore basically. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, episode 2 also saw a massive dip in drawing quality, meaning the only saving grace from episode 1 was now gone. Now here's the thing, you might say that these things don't exactly make an episode bad, and you would be correct, most fans wouldn't even notice these things, but the fact that these issues exist gives us an idea of just how rushed things are behind the scenes. Veteran directors don't make mistakes like that under normal circumstances. Why is there a lack of bridging shots? Probably because some of the shots weren't finished on time, forcing the team to remove them and linger on the shots around them for longer than planned. Why do some of the drawings look poor? Because the animator didn't have the time to draw proper layouts and the animation director didn't have the time to correct them properly. Why is there a lack of movement? Because the animators didn't have the time to properly animate a scene, you get the idea. The episode wasn't all bad though, we did get a fairly impressive Kenichiro Aoki sequence near the end. This slow motion shot was really well animated, the effects animation was smooth, and the sense of weight in these two shots was conveyed really well, mainly thanks to the hair animation, good stuff. This sequence is the most impressive scene from this show so far, which is a bit depressing because it's far from Aoki's best. Episode 3 was more of the same, a few decent looking stills, more visible corner cutting, a small amount of movement when needed, the whole 9 yards. The fight near the start was alright, they reused a bunch of cuts from the first pre-animated preview, but I wasn't fond of some of the directorial choices. I was baffled as to why they replaced a bunch of perfectly well animated cuts from the PV with shots that were nowhere near as polished, God knows. Cool hair and fabric animation though, you love to see it. The episode also featured a second fight, but this one was far more rough looking. I can appreciate the ambition and the modern feel it had timing-wise, but it was completely broken. It had copious amounts of jank, stiff movement, and poor drawings, an absolute mess. Episode 4 was marginally better, I liked this sequence in particular, it was quite fun. Of course, it wasn't without its issues, the action near the end, animated by Kenichiro Aoki once again, was quite broken. A fair bit of melt and questionable drawings, although this shot did look good, loved the rack focus shift. This episode also had more of those continuity errors. Karo is completely hunched over in this shot, but he is standing up straight in the next one without any visual indicator of him doing so, lots of that stuff. Overall, not awful, but far from perfect. And that brings us to the big one, the one I was waiting for and the one that forced me to make this video, episode 5. What a mess. Now, contrary to popular belief, I actually don't like beating a dead horse and milking a topic over and over again. I didn't make videos about episodes 2 through 4 simply because there wasn't much worth talking about. Now yes, I could have made this video, I could have gone over them regardless, but I decided to give the show the benefit of the doubt and wait for an action-heavy episode to pop up first. I knew it wouldn't look fantastic, but it would be a valuable indicator. Regardless of what it looked like, it would give us an idea of what the team can realistically pull off. Oh boy. This episode was a complete mess. Nearly every bit of movement was broken beyond recognition, every shot looked wonky, every action cut fell apart in glorious fashion, it was really bad. I can go over every single cut in detail, but what's the point? I'll just end up beating this show while it's down. What a mess. We did have a few bright spots, some of Kazunori Ozawa's effects animation looked decent and Van Oba's sequence was surprisingly solid, although not without its issues. It was nice seeing a bit of background animation, plus the cool first-person shot was, well, cool. Fun fact, that part was Oba's own idea, he was allowed to modify the storyboards a bit. We also had... oh, that's it. We had nothing else of note, that's literally it. Oh boy, this episode was a kicker, it was rough. You know, it was really sad seeing fans online, fans who had been optimistic and reasonable up until now, feel disheartened and start doom posting. It was sad, but it was understandable, I get it. This episode was beyond disappointing, that's a fair reaction. Is it the worst I've ever seen? No, just a few months back I saw a show use placeholder 3D backgrounds because the background art wasn't finished on time. It's the anime industry, there's always worse, but good god did it look rough. And that's One Punch Man Season 3 so far. Started off not bad, but quickly devolved into, well, bad. I do appreciate the art direction and compositing upgrades, but there's no denying how visibly rough and last minute, scratch that, last second all of it looks. So are we cooked? Probably. This is a messy production and it looks like it, and it'll continue to look like it. It won't magically turn into Jujutsu Kaisen, quality doesn't just materialize out of thin air. There is, however, a tiny bit of hope. Let me rephrase that, that's a bit misleading. There are two possibilities. 1. Production conditions are even worse than what I had predicted, and episode 5 is pretty much the best this season has to offer. And 2. The conditions are about as bad as I had predicted, and we might get a memorable episode or 2 in the future. The first possibility is fairly self-explanatory, but let me elaborate on the second. You see, so far, every single episode has been storyboarded by director Shinpei Nagai. None of the main action guys associated with the studio besides Aoki have shown up. Aoki's own contribution has been a lot less compared to season 2, and we haven't seen any of that 2D 3D interaction director Nagai talked about. What does all of that mean? That means unlike season 2, they aren't distributing their animation resources somewhat evenly across the season this time around. Instead, they are focusing on a certain part. It can be a few episodes, it can be one episode, or it can be a part of an episode, and sacrificing the rest of the season in the process, a decision they had to make because of how f***ed things are behind the scenes. If that's true, we might get some good stuff in the future. If not, well, expect more episode 5s. It's a shame. I feel like I repeat that phrase all the time when talking about this show. It's a shame. Of course, it goes without saying, but please don't go around harassing staff members. Not only does that make you a scumbag, it also does nothing. The higher-ups don't care. They don't care about you being upset, and they don't care about the staff being harassed. All they care about is the bottom line, and unfortunately, there's very little we can do. I can assure you they don't give a fuck about what we think about the show. They'll get their numbers regardless. There's a reason why so many production committees get away with kneecapping their shows, because there's absolutely nothing we fans can realistically do about it. And on that depressing note, let's call it a day. I don't plan on covering this show in the foreseeable future, although that can change. If an episode actually looks good or if something unpredictable happens, I'll talk about it. Till then though, that's about it. A special thanks to Noot03, Amir and the Gallus90 for becoming tier 3 members, and until next time.